Let's take a moment to talk about storyboards. Storyboards are both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, storyboards are great, especially for beginners, because it allows you to convey the information that you as a director or as a creator see, the thing that you envision as you take the script and turn it into visual output. So storyboards serve as probably one of the best ways to indicate your vision and to share your vision with the rest of the cast and crew. From a technical standpoint, it will give everyone a good idea of what kind of shots you're looking for, what kind of equipment and gear they might need as far as lenses and cameras and cranes and dollies and where are we going to place this position, this gear, what lights are we going to need? All of this stuff is covered in the storyboard. And from the producer side, it starts to give you a better idea of the things that are going to be needed in a storyboard. I'm going to talk about some of the negatives of storyboards here in just a moment, but kind of realize that if you've never seen a storyboard before, it's kind of like a comic book, right? It's kind of like telling the story shot by shot in drawn or illustrated form. For you, as you are working on your projects, here is something that is vitally important to keep in mind. Storyboards are done before you do any production. Storyboarding is part of the pre-production process. And unfortunately, I see a lot of people who, at the last minute, as they're about to turn in their projects, are quickly trying to draw out their storyboard after the project's complete. At that point, storyboards serve no purpose. So make sure that you're always doing your storyboards during the pre-production stage of your project. Now, storyboards can be as simple as you want them to be. They can be as complex as you want to be. I mean, look at some of these from Game of Thrones. These look fantastic, but you may not be a great illustrator. You may only be able to draw in stick figure form, and that is completely okay, as long as the idea that you're trying to get across is clear to everyone else. And so you will have to sit down as a director. You will have to sit down with the rest of your team to go over these storyboards so that they understand what you're talking about. And while you may be able to hire storyboard artists to take your information and turn it into these fantastic works of art, the best way for you to start out is to start out by drawing little thumbnails of what people are going to see, because you as the director know what you want in your mind. And you could say, well, I want to establish the establishing shot in this piece is going to be this grand flyover of the landscape. And so the storyboard artist might be seeing one thing in their head and sketching that out and then showing it to you, and it may not be what you want. So always start with you, the director, drawing the storyboards first. And it's okay if you draw poorly. Remember that. It is okay if you draw poorly. Let's get a good idea of what storyboards look like and how they can be helpful in your production. If we go back to a previous lesson where I've written out a little short script for a scene that is taking place in Northern California at a ranch, we can see the description here. And when you develop a shooting script, sometimes the description from the shooting script could become a text storyboard by itself. So that's one kind of storyboard you could do, is simply taking the shooting script description and putting it in for each of the panels and each of the shots. So at least you can develop a beat and understand how the flow of your piece is going to go. Those aren't very visual though, so we don't want to use those. Instead, we want to use some kind of stick figure through the lens kind of view. So here we have our shot of our two heroes cresting the hill of a ridge overlooking a ranch, and it's morning because we can see the sun coming over the mountain. These are not good. This is me just scribbling on a whiteboard, but it's conveying the idea of what is here. I can let someone else take care of this and nail it down as far as perspective and actually getting everything right, or maybe drawing some horses. I don't know. Nobody can draw horses correctly. I mean, come on. Then we're going to go to a medium 2 shot of our heroes on the horses as they approach and stop and look down over the ridge. And we hear our hero say his first line. Bodine says his first line. And then in the third shot, we kind of go to a 3/4 profile of Catherine turning and looking at Bodine and responding to him. And then that allows us to get a close-up of Bodine kind of looking a little sheepish. That is then followed by Catherine with her comment about the Satanists. And then she's interrupted by Bodine, and we go back to the close-up as he nods and asks, why do you think everything is so empty? And we get an insert shot or a cutaway shot of this barn with these moving vans positioned behind it. That then allows us to come back out to our medium 2 shot as they talk about proceeding with caution. And then we get to the bit where basically they're going to go down the hill towards the ranch. So we can almost go back to that very first shot and maybe do a push in. So there you go. Very quickly, I have kind of drawn out the sequence that I see it in my mind. And we can look at things and say, well, does this work really exactly? Does this work as far as timing goes? Does this work from continuity wise goes? And there may be that one shot, shot 3, the 3/4 profile shot, that in relation to the medium shot that we just saw and then the close-up shot that follows, maybe kind of jumpy. And so we may want to remove that completely, but at least we have that down. At least that is something that we know we might want to use in the future. So as we look at this from a director standpoint or from a crew standpoint or from a producer standpoint, we can just look at this very first shot of the horses riding and the riders riding up over the hill and stopping at the crest of the ridge overlooking the ranch house below. So we know that we have to be fairly high in this shot in order to capture the riders and the ranch. We're going to need a very deep depth of field in order to capture everything in focus, if that's truly what the director wants. And this also means, just from the bare minimum, we're going to need to get this camera up high. Now, this could be a drone shot. This could be something on top of a big crane, but at least the producer is now thinking, oh, in order to do this, these are the things that we're going to need to pull off this shot correctly. And we also know from the end shot, the very last shot of this sequence, that the director wants to push in as the heroes start to ride down the ridge towards the ranch. So again, now we have to either move this drone forward or we have to move this giant crane forward, which would mean it needs to be on some kind of a track if it's a crane, and it needs to be level so it doesn't start rolling down the hill. So there are all sorts of things that need to happen just in that one shot from the producer standpoint and from the crew standpoint, so they know this is what the director is thinking. This also tells us that we probably need a very wide camera lens, like maybe a 14 millimeter lens or something, in order to capture this. So that really says a lot. And that's kind of the point of the storyboard, is to convey all of that information. And so we would do this then for every shot in the sequence. We could look and say, in the 2 shot, this is the kind of lens we would need. This is the position of the camera in relation to everything. Also, if we go back and look at this entire piece, we know that if we truly want the sun rising over the east as our heroes approach from the west, then we know that we're going to need to shoot at a very specific time of day, and we're not going to have very much time because the sun will rise very quickly. So shots 1 and 9 in this sequence will need to be done probably all at once, and will be probably the most important shot of the day, because then when we go in for our 2 shots and our close-ups and our over the shoulders and our inserts, those can kind of be done at any time of the day, because we can then use additional lighting and reflectors and diffusers to kind of cheat those particular shots. So that's a storyboard. Those are what storyboards are used for. And you need to learn to draw, even if it's poorly, to convey the idea that you're trying to get across. So a couple of things that you can do. Number one, if you can draw in some kind of perspective. I know my barn shot is not perfect, but we can see that we have a little bit of a perspective here, so we kind of know what angle we're shooting from. We can also tell that we're shooting up higher than we might, and we can kind of see whatever that junk is beside the barn. Hint, it's a van. We kind of get the idea for that. The other thing is to make use of arrows, as we can see in the final shot with those blue arrows. That's indicating that we're starting to push in on this scene as or push in on this shot as the shot progresses. You can kind of see in this same shot the orange arrows. That's indicating, and arrows and direction arrows look really good. Or are very helpful, because then we can see this is the writers coming in from the lower left part of the screen and into frame. We can also use arrows to indicate movement in the case of shot 3, where Catherine turns her head to look at Bodine. And if you're wondering what the heck's going on with these heads, I try to use kind of little perspective lines on my heads so that we can see down the middle where the where you split the face vertically, and then I have an indicator of the eye line that wraps all the way around the head, and based on where that position is, we can tell whether we're higher than the person's face or lower than the person's face, and we also get a little bit of perspective on where the characters are looking. So if you can do just those minimal things, everything else can kind of be set aside and can be kind of forgiven, and everyone's going to be okay with what you deliver. Now, that being said, there are a couple of other storyboard ideas or concepts that you might want to take into account. The first is the idea of a vertical or an elevation storyboard. The elevation storyboard basically says, what does this shot look like from the side? Where are all of the elements in the shot in relation to one another? So if we go back and we look at this very first opening shot, we can see that we have the ranch here and we have a hill with our riders on top. And so in order to get that perspective, we know that this camera has to be way high. And so this kind of elevated or side view storyboard or diagram really gives us a better view of what's going to be needed in order to complete this shot. How are everything's situated in relation to one another from elevation. Another one that you're going to see quite a bit, and again, both the side or the elevated shot and this one, the top view or the bird's eye shot, are going to be much more technical in nature, and you're probably going to end up having your director of cinematography or your crew or your stage hands, depending on what type of production you're working in. You're going to have them draw these out. This shot right here is pretty much the first shot, again, seen from above, and we can see where cameras might be placed. We can see where lights might be placed, the cameras and the characters or the actors all in relation to everything else on the scene. As you progress through this course, you will see this kind of a bird's eye shot that I will use quite a bit. It's the two people having a conversation at the table shot, where we're basically looking down from above. We have the two people on either side of the table, and we can figure out, hey, here's a basic 3-camera placement to do this 2-person conversation. So that's the bird's eye and the elevated view schematics or diagrams or types of storyboards if you want to go and be that detailed. However, again, because you're the director or because you're the creator, you're trying to get the vision out of your head onto paper so the rest of the cast and crew know exactly what you're talking about when you talk about a medium 2 shot, or when you talk about a close-up, or when you're talking about an extreme close-up, or whatever that may be. Now, there are some drawbacks to the storyboard format, and especially for beginners, especially for people who are just beginning in this video journey, too oftentimes I see people getting locked in to the storyboard and only seeing exactly what they see in their mind or exactly what's been put on their page as the only way to shoot this scene. And unfortunately, maybe you get to the ranch, maybe the ranch that you had in your mind that's kind of nestled in a little valley. Maybe it's not. Maybe the location is actually a flat plain. How are you going to shoot this scene with no hills? And some directors and some crew members will go to a location, find out it's not exactly how they had it in their storyboard, and boom, have a freak out with their minds blown. So that is kind of the drawback to storyboards, is people become too reliant on the storyboards. So this then leads to the concept of a shot list. And the shot list is just a little bit different. Instead of, drawing out a visual representation of what these shots are, you as a director and working with your crew, you come up with a shot list of all the shots that you need for this scene. So for example, as we look back at our sequence that we've talked about before, we know that we need a high establishing shot of the riders approaching the ranch. That's our first shot. Then we know, and that's also our last shot. So we could put a 1 and a slash and a 9 so that we know that those two shots are all done at the same time. We know we need a frontal medium shot, a medium 2 shot of our actors on the horses, maybe down a little bit or higher a little bit. Those kinds of things you don't have to be super specific on, just so we know that we're getting the coverage that we need in order to make this scene work when we hand it off to our editor. So we need the 2 shot of the horse. Maybe we do the 3/4 profile shot as another piece. Then we have individual close-ups of Bodine and Catherine. Then we have an insert shot that's a kind of a wide shot of the barn and the vans behind it. And then basically shots 2 and shots 8 are exactly the same. Shots 4 and shots 6 are exactly the same. Shots 1 and shots 9 are exactly the same. So in this shot list, we very quickly can see this is what we need to get, and this is the order in which we may want to get them. Keep in mind too, I should point out that movies, films, videos, corporate videos, no matter what they are, they're not shot in order. So you know that by looking at this, you can kind of schedule your day, and you can say, well, let's start with the wide shots first and then work our way in for the close-ups. And then at some point, you may not even need both of the actors on set at the same time, especially when you're doing your close-ups. Now, this is really good. The shot list is really good, but we have 9 shots that we have to get to in the day, or more realistically, we have maybe 5 shots that we have to get for the entire day, because as we're cutting back and forth, we can see some shots are duplicated. But we know that we need to get 5 of these shots done during the day, and maybe we don't have enough time to get these 5 shots done before lunch or before the sun is too high to where we can't do this again. So we may need to then look at ways, and this is the nice thing about the shot list and the storyboards working together, is we might want to look at our shot list and say, well, what is a shot we know we don't need? Well, maybe we look at it and we can say, you know what, we don't need this 3/4 profile shot. Let's just get rid of shot 3, and let's just go from the 2 shot then to the close-up of Bodine, and then we can get the close-up of Catherine, and we can eliminate those shots completely. Maybe this conversation that Bodine says where he wishes, he hopes that they have tea, and Catherine is saying, this is not a social call, and then we get Bodine's kind of reaction of kind of like, oh, I said something stupid. We can get that all in either a 2 shot and a 2 shot with a close-up. And that works so much better, and it saves us all the time of moving a camera, moving lights, moving the actors, making sure that everything is in the proper position for just that 1 shot. So that is something else that can come from the shot list and from a storyboard. The final way that you might want to think about developing your shot list is to do what's called lining your script. Now, keep in mind, there's 2 ways that you can line your script. One way is during pre-production. The other one happens during production, where essentially you take your script and you take the scene and all of your shots. So for example, shot 1, this establishing shot, and you draw a line down your script as to where this shot takes place. So shot 1 and shot 9, it's only at the beginning and only at the end. We probably would not use this for our master shot of the entire scene, but we know that those 2 shots need to be there on this script. We then can go in and say, well, this 2 shot, that's something that could run the entire length of this scene. So we'll draw a line that shows where this coverage or where we might be shooting this. We've decided to drop shot 3, but here we have the individual close-ups and where does Bodine, where do we need these close-ups of Bodine? So we indicate those there. Same way with Catherine. We have an insert shot, which is another shot. And boom, we have lined our script to kind of give us an idea of where these shots fall in the scene and who and what is needed in each of these shots. Now, during the production, you will see people lining the script to show where people are speaking, where people are in the shot or not in the shot, and also writing on the line script what the shots are, the shot types, and how many takes there are, so that when the editor gets this, they kind of have an idea of what footage they're dealing with. We could very easily kind of do that same thing now, and we can see that there are moments where we have some back and forth takes, some cuts that we can go from the close-up of Bodine to the close-up with Catherine to the close-up of Bodine again. and how we get back and forth to the 2 shots. And again, if our day is very quick, if we are on a very tight schedule, we could even refine this further. We could get rid of shots 4 and shots 6 if we had to in this shot. If we were so rushed for time, we could do our establishing shot, our 2 shot, a close-up of Catherine, and then back to our 2 shot of Bodine talking about the barn. We'd need the insert of the barn, and then back to our 2 shot, and then back to our big establishing shot going down the hill. So now we've gone from 5 setups, I think is what we're at now, 4 or 5 setups to now 3 setups. Now that may be not enough coverage to edit something together effectively, but if we are rushed for time and we need a bare bones minimum, now we have a line script, we have a shot list, and we have a storyboard that we all kind of refer to in order to see how this scene might edit together. I know that's very fast. I've rushed through this very, very quickly, but I wanted to give you an idea of just what storyboards are used for, how you can use them, and how you should use them, especially as a beginner, to work with the rest of your cast and crew so everyone kind of has an idea of what you're thinking in your head. I think storyboards are great. I know some people rely heavily on their storyboards, but I also know that a lot of people today are starting to move away from storyboards and focus only on the shot list instead. For the projects that you do in this class, you will need to do storyboards, you will need to do shot lists, just so you can get in the habit of doing both. Okay, that wraps it up. It's a lot of information. If you have any questions or comments, just reach out to me. And thanks for checking out this video.